Hello and welcome to the Royal Beat in what has been another explosive week for those in the House of Windsor. This week, Prince Harry, in his most recent interview, there seems to be a lot of those these days, compared his life in the royal family to a mix between The Truman Show and The Zoo, following his already controversial interview with his wife Meghan with Oprah Winfrey back in March. I don't think any of us saw that there was more coming. He sat down with an American podcaster, Dax Shepard, and, well, they talked a lot. We'll be walking you through all of the highlights from that conversation a little later in the show, as well as looking back at the reign of Queen Victoria on the anniversary of what would have been her birthday. And joining me to help me navigate these choppy royal waters, Katie Nichols is with us, the royal for Vanity Fair. Royal correspondent Robert Jobson's back with us. Lovely to see you. And royal historian Tessa, lovely to have you back with us as well. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Good. We've got good news to kick the show off. Not often we get to say that these days, is it?
Not often.
Guess who's having a baby? Robert?
No, I'm not.
Nope.
I see, yeah.
Thank you for clearing that up. Beatrice.
Wasn't the timing of that announcement interesting as well? That was what I loved the most about that announcement, actually.
Well, so let's just backtrack, shall we? It was announced on the day that was also the third wedding anniversary.
Coincidence, eh?
Meghan and Harry. And it was claimed that at the wedding of Princess Eugenie...
Yes.
Meghan and Harry let it slip that they were pregnant.
That's right, which really upset Eugenie and embarrassed Harry, because Harry and Eugenie are very, very close. And it's just not the done thing. I don't think it matters whether you come from America or the UK. You don't go to someone's wedding and upstage the bride with your own happy news. So,
especially when you're the most famous couple, arguably.
Absolutely.
If you're Meghan, don't you?
Yeah, OK. But the good news is there's another baby on the way. And this will be her first, his second, I believe?
Yes, and actually, I mean, Beatrice has had a bit of a trial run at being mummy because she is a really hands-on mother with Edo's son, and they're already very sort of tight-knit as a family, but I think there's a lot of joy about this baby. It couldn't have come at a better time for the Queen, who's had a really difficult run. She's lost the Duke of Edinburgh. There is so much fallout with Harry and all the time, and then this week she lost her little puppy as well, and you just think how much pain has she got to go through.
And we know that one of her daily rituals is certainly has been during her period of mourning was to get out with the dogs and walk. It's something she loves to do.
She does. She loves to walk. It keeps her, I think, in really good health. It keeps her sort of mentally agile and physically well. And she's had a lifelong love affair with corgis. She knew that, so I'm imagining they knew it was going to have a short lifespan, but it would still have been upset.
So this nonetheless.
Yeah, of course it does, and this is very, very happy news. And Beatrice is, one of the Queen's favourite grandchildren. In fact, that's the Queen's dress that she's wearing on her wedding day. So I think everyone was hoping for another baby announcement. I just think that timing was interesting, that it was announced on the very day of Harry and Meghan's third wedding anniversary. You just think revenge is a dish best served cold.
I think you're squirreling around looking for trouble there. I think it was coincidental, and what I love most of all about that picture is that she looks so like the Queen's great-great-grandmother Victoria. It's always staggering. Even people who aren't into the royal family and think, oh, puff and nonsense, you can't get away from genetic history staring yourself in the face.
Well,
our most famous
that's interesting.
Queen.
We're going to come to Victoria a little later in the show, but first, I'd like to pick up with you on Prince Harry's most recent interview with a podcaster called Dax Shepard. Now, Dax Shepard hosts a podcast in the States called Armchair Expert. He's married to the woman who is the voice of Anna in Frozen, quite well known for his own kind of mental health issues and addictions. This is the lady in the middle here is an actress who hosts the show with him, who was working for the family, I believe, as a housekeeper. And on the week that Harry joins them, this podcaster announces that just like Harry and Meghan, he too has an exclusive deal with Spotify. So I'm guessing that's that's the business case for why has Harry done this. But then you ask yourself, why did he say so much? Talk me through the big take, Robert.
Well, actually, I thought the best bit of it was not necessarily the more whinging on that we've heard before, but the bit at the end when they talk about the two of them. Harry disappears, and they start talking about the timing of it and how they wish that they think they got the timing wrong because they have to make sure the timing coordinates with the morning shows in America so that they can defend them against the British media. All very weird. It shows you the sort of madness that's going on with Harry and Meghan at the moment. But I thought it was pathetic, actually. I mean, I know it's Mental Health Awareness Week. It's a very important message, and mental health is an extremely important subject. But the amount of time has gone on about this, and not reflecting necessarily about himself. He seems hell-bent on blaming everybody else for his problems, and mainly his father, and then he attacked his father, then he attacked his grandmother, and shamefully also his grandfather as well, who's only just been buried. So I didn't think it was necessary to do all this again so soon after. It was apparently an attempt at a rapprochement at the funeral.
You say he attacked his father and he attacked the Queen and Philip. Let's just go back over what was said there.
He did.
Well,
What did he say that wasn't?
Okay, what he said was...
It's an attack on their parenting skills.
He said that life was about breaking the cycle of genetic...
It's an attack on his father. Not at all.
I think the thing is, it's really important to bear in mind, this was a very long conversation. For those who sat right the way through it, full marks for perseverance.
Well, I got
about an hour and a half long, and there were
92 minutes.
Relatively innocuous sentences. Now, which of us, when we're talking about ourselves and our mental health, bear with me,
absolute
Robert,
nonsense.
which of us
let's hear you out, Tessa.
attribute some of our behaviour and our parenting on what came before? Almost all of us. He actually disclaimed it by kind of going, I don't want to blame anyone. I thought it was quite gentle, and the bigger picture is...
I don't want to blame anyone, but you're to blame. Nonsense.
It actually wasn't done in a bitchy way. He was simply providing a disclaimer as to why he's done what he's done. And actually, he's arguably been left with no choice. If you're cut off from the royal family and you have a large financial circus to maintain, you're going to have to occasionally talk about the big fellas back in Britain, i.e. the Windsors.
What on earth are you talking about? This is a guy who's 36 years old, OK? He hasn't really earned a living, apart from when he worked in the army. The reality here, he's going on... He was cut off financially. Well, most people are financially sorting themselves out by 36. If they're not, they're pretty pathetic. Number two, he was clearly attacking his father and clearly attacking his grandmother and his grandfather over what was going on before. If you don't see that, then I understand that you're defending someone. I understand why he's got to make a living, but does he have to make a living continually whinging on about his family and the woes that he believes upon him? Why?
Let's just pick up on some of that stuff. So he did have a job. He worked as an Apache pilot in the
co-pilot. He never actually flew.
Which is a very high-ranking position. So to say that he hasn't worked would be disingenuous. Tessa,
he said he got cut off financially.
Yes.
Funnily enough...
Tessa, I understand where you're coming from. I think when you sit down and you listen to the full 92 minutes, as did I, Robert, you're right. There is context wrapped around it, which makes it sound less like the attack that Robert heard. However, he also acknowledged within that conversation that he's aware of the fact that this will be picked up and reported. And he's talking about people that also have no right to reply.
That's how he's making his money.
Let me just... And
this
then
is all about money. This is all about money. You can't believe it isn't all about money.
Where I think that this becomes a difficult conversation for anybody to respond to is that we know the royal family are not allowed to respond.
I understand that.
So he is really... Is it right to be talking about people that have effectively no right to reply?
Well, let me just jump in here. I think you raise a really valid point, and this is what he did in the Oprah interview as well. He knows how the firm works because it is in his DNA.
Well, he says that. He said, in his 20s, he questioned whether he wanted the job because, quote, I've seen the business model.
Behind the curtain, right?
Yeah.
And he has. So he knows full well, as Robert says, that the royals cannot answer back. Now, after Oprah, they had no option but to respond. They couldn't let those allegations of racism slide. So they addressed that. But if you notice...
Which we haven't heard anything more on.
He's made it very clear that mental health is going to be his raison d'etre. This is his mission, not just for now, for the rest of his life. Now, I spoke to close aides of his this week who said, we are going to hear more of this. We're going to hear more of this in the Apple TV series. We are going to hear more of this going through. This is a man who has been through, you can hear it in his language. He has been through probably years of therapy now.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? You tell me, did he have therapy before meeting Meghan? Or
yes,
therapy...
he did. He has said to him, he said in his podcast with Bryony Gordon that it was his brother, William, who told him, you need to go and have therapy to deal with that unprocessed grief. Harry was so angry that he was on the verge of punching someone. This was this anger that had built up.
People, photographers.
He did lash out. So actually, really what I'd like to hear Harry say is, the first person to suggest I go into therapy is my brother. I think the point that Robert is making is that he had...
my own point.
Fine. Well, let's say the point is this. A lot of people are upset that Harry is conveniently erasing a lot of what he's said before and giving us this new narrative. It was his wife that got him into therapy. And actually, initially, it was your brother and your father who encouraged you to get it.
That's where I became confused, because I was like you thinking, I'm sure that there was therapy pre-Meghan.
So let's put that on the table.
Let's put that on the table.
Why couldn't he... Why was there a problem with Meghan finding a therapist if there was Meghan
It takes us back to that, doesn't it, Robert?
Yeah. Yeah, her husband had therapy, so why?
But again, Robert, we find
it's utter.
We find, sorry, Tessa,
money.
we find them sitting in front of American interviewers, Oprah or Dax Shepard, who then don't do the job that hopefully you or I would do.
Well, we would have been more
Where we say,
forensic.
hang on a minute, you had therapy before you met
Because they're
Meghan.
making money out of the whole thing. The whole thing is a money-making exercise. Why should somebody who's been cut off at 36 suddenly be coming out with all of these TV shows and all of these things? Because him and his wife and their agents have worked out they can make multi-millions of dollars.
Do you know what, Robert? I entirely agree with you. It is entirely a money-making exercise, and we just need to look back at his great-great, I think it was great-great-uncle, the abdicated Edward VIII, also sidelined, shelved off, lived in exile between several continents. Guess what? It is super expensive being a duke and duchess when you're banged off the civil list. So,
He's got 30 million.
so the abdicated king had to constantly revisit the narrative of him being biffed off the throne. Actually, he chose to be biffed off the throne.
He did actually write an
he wrote a book.
autobiography
He did in
on
1951.
the eve of the coronation to get
Indeed.
maximum exposure.
And if you want to know what's going to
Actually, I
happen
know quite a
going
lot about
forward,
him.
all you need to do is look back at the history of the Windsors.
I
think
that's
this
a
has been
convenient-
One at a time,
replicated.
one at a
that's
time, one at a
convenient
time.
thing. And the fact is, but let's look.
What did the royal family
hang on a
expect?
second.
Hold on. Listen, let's
Hang on
not
a
have a row, let's have a conversation.
Hang on a second. Let's go back to the sale of all the jewelleries and the money that he conned the previous king out of for the sale of Sandringham and Balmoral, which were private residences. George VI, because George VI felt that he actually had paid the money out. So it's easy to say that, and I'm up on this side of the history as you are, I can assure you. At this moment in time, how I would thought the reason they went to the other side of the pond was to find privacy and to get away from the media and exposure.
You didn't think that.
You didn't think that, Robert, because they wouldn't have ended up in LA if that's what they
Well,
wanted.
that's not where they originally went. Let's be fair. They said they went for privacy.
All I'm saying is the
won't
last time
speak.
a major royal left and was basically
you
in
just
exile.
said that.
But I know, but the royal family should have learnt that if they totally got rid of Harry, which effectively they did with the Mexit case, this was going to live
They
to
chose
haunt
to
them,
do
and
it.
that's what's happening. That's all.
They chose to do. I think that's a massive stretch.
I think it's two to tango.
I'm lost on the point that you're stretching, sorry.
Yeah, so
The point I'm stretching is that when Harry and Meghan were basically elbowed out of the royal family,
weren't
And why aren't they left?
okay, as did Edward VIII,
he was
left.
told to leave by the constitution of this case.
He abdicated. He chose to marry his
Well, he had no
woman
choice but to go,
abdicate.
didn't he?
The bottom line is that to survive financially as a royal outside the royal family, you have to make money, and the only thing you're trained to
30
do, other than
million
wearing a
in the bank.
military uniform, is to talk about your royal heritage.
But listen, that you've made your point, Tessa,
Yeah.
but Robert is quite right. This is a man of considerable wealth.
30 million in the bank.
30 million.
It's going to cost a lot
In
more than that to keep
Oh,
the
my
show on the
heart
road.
bleeds. My heart bleeds.
I'm not asking your heart to bleed. I'm just
but the
explaining
point
why they're
is-
doing what they're doing.
Well, they're doing what they're doing to make multi-million
Yes.
pounds and to create an alternative royal experience going on the other side of the pond. And their bitterness towards the monarchy and towards their current incumbents is unheard of. It's unnecessary to do what they're doing.
I think it's worth just making the point as well. How much more of an appetite is there going to be
Quite.
for them talking about this subject? I mean, how much more can you wring out of it? I just feel that they will get to a point where people, even in America, where they seem to hang on every word this couple say, we've heard enough. You've got to change your tune now.
When he said that the First Amendment, and I'm sure as a historian, Tessa, and someone who believes in the freedom of the media and the freedom of the press, to say that the First Amendment was bonkers certainly didn't get a great... Number one, bonkers, is that a great word to use for someone such a champion of mental health? I don't think so. And number two, the First Amendment has got him... Is actually, for a moment, there's been a few very senior people criticise him for his slightly out of kilter words.
Robert, the good news is you seem to really enjoy getting angry about this.
I'm not angry at all.
And if it is history repeating itself...
Well, it is, and
the
that's what you're saying.
abdication-
You're saying
The
that. No one else
abdication,
is.
I think, 37, 38, he was bringing out his autobiography in 1951.
Well, hang
so
on
we've
a
got
sec.
decades of
No,
this
but hang on a
behaviour
sec,
to
this
run.
guy's so far down the totem pole, he was never going to be the king. We're talking about the...
Doesn't matter in the
Oh,
new
so it doesn't
media.
matter.
It doesn't, because we live
Of
in a new
course
media
it matters.
world.
That was the abdication of a king. This is number 6 in line to the throne.
This guy is a kingly superstar in bed
Nonsense.
with a queen called Oprah.
Oh, my
okay?
God.
The Duke of Edinburgh, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, William and Kate, have taken time to say thank you to royal fans for their kind words. This isn't something that they've put out on their social media or released to the press. This is something that did pop up on social media from a royal fan who had written to express their condolences at the family's loss, and this is what they received back. A nice touch.
I think it's a really nice touch, and I think it's a very personal touch. and quite indicative of everything we've seen in terms of the direction the Cambridges are moving in now. I certainly have noticed in the events that we're covering, the sort of video that we're seeing, certainly that launch on YouTube, a far more intimate and personal William and Kate, who are, I'm really pleased actually, more willing to let their guard down a bit and show us a little bit more of themselves. And if you've ever written into any member of the royal family, you will know it may take time to get a response.
You will get a response.
You do get a response. I always remember my daughter written to the Queen after her Jubilee celebrations, never expecting to hear anything back, and she did. She got a letter back, and I think they realised that those letters back mean so much to the people that take the time to write in. And it's a personal letter. It's not just a thanks signed off. It's a detailed personal note that I'm sure that royal fan will treasure for many years to come. But I think what William and Kate are doing is, in many ways, they are securing their longevity. They are securing their future by writing to these fans and acknowledging them, by launching themselves on YouTube. They're reaching a new demographic. Yeah. They are securing that loyal following of the future generation, and I think that's what we're seeing in everything they're doing at the moment.
Interesting. I mean, Diana was a great letter writer. We know that. Mm-hmm. We're going to come to Queen Victoria's journals a little later. So, you know, literally through the years, we see that the royals have always made great note. I myself have received some wonderful letters from Prince Charles. None of them a copy and paste job, may I add. You know, all very, very personal in the detail. Is this them paying that respect, that tradition forward? Sorry.
Yes, I think absolutely, and they appreciate that the written form, particularly in this digital age where we're firing off texts and WhatsApps and emails like there's no tomorrow, there's nothing quite like a handwritten letter. It's a lovely thing to receive.
I think we've also seen the sort of Cambridges try and up their game, haven't we? In the wake of the Oprah interview, they've gone on YouTube now. They've released little videos on relevant anniversaries. She went to that big vigil
for Sarah Everard.
For Sarah Everard in a very discreet fashion. And I think they're trying to become more democratic, forgive the oxymoron there, but in their approach. They've got their work cut out, haven't they? I mean, they are effectively, I suppose, small c conservatives, which will appeal to a small c royal audience. And I wonder how they're
bound by duty, aren't they? There's only so much.
I agree.
There is only so much that they can do.
I'm nothing against them, but I think Harry and Meghan are a tough act to follow, and they've got America.
I do think Kate and William's reputation took a serious nosedive after Oprah. I mean, I know that from my Vanity Fair audience.
Yes.
I know that from, you know, the stories they were choosing to cover.
Because of Meghan's claims that Kate
well, there's two reasons. One, because Meghan is American and they will back their own. Secondly, because I think they feel a connection with Meghan and Harry. I mean, I know a lot of people find this whole woke speak and everything Harry is doing in Britain quite difficult to tolerate sometimes. But in America, they're celebrated for it. Mm-hmm. And I think there was a risk in America that William and Kate were just being seen to be a little bit out of touch, a little bit old before their time, a little bit stuffy. And I do agree with you, Tessa. I think they have made a concerted effort to just inject some new vigour and pace into what they're doing.
We saw with the YouTube channel launch, didn't we? That video was very unlike the kind of videos that we'd seen released from them before.
Yes.
And we've checked in on the YouTube channel. Not a lot of content has been uploaded since. So we're really hoping that we're going to start to see them populate the feed a little more.
Well, I think you will. I think what they desperately don't want in the House of Windsor is for them to bleed their American support away, you know, because of Harry and Meghan. They need to hold on to that. After all, you know, the presidency in America is a bit like an elective kingship, partially modelled on our monarchy. They take all the sort of pomp ceremony and they stick it into a sort of more political context. And I think that the Americans have always revered the way Britain's managed to keep the two separate and have this family that kind of wears the feathers and the sceptre and rides in the gold carriage. And it is a shame if we fail or don't continue to bask in the kind of attention of the American audience.
But I think that some of our irreverent royals have always found a kind of, you know, a groundswell of support in America. Look at Fergie and Diana, whilst they're still retaining a love for the British royal family. I think the two can exist, or have they not in the past, do you think, Robert?
They do exist, but I worry about the Harry and Meghan thing bleeding away from it, that's all.
What do you think, Robert? Can these guys shine brightly alongside Meghan and Harry stateside?
Well, I think it's quite difficult for all members of the House of Windsor when they go to America not to be outshone by Meghan and Harry in the story, because, of course, the whole media will be looking at, are they going to go and see them? And the story will go away from what they're actually doing. So I think any future visit by a member of the royal family will be tricky going to America. Have they bled it? I think to a degree they have, and I'm sure that's probably was part of their intention.
OK, well, thank you all very much. We're going to take a short break now, but when we come back, it's time plundered the history books. We'll be looking back at the reign of Queen Victoria on the anniversary of what would have been her birthday. And here's a question for you. Do you know what the Black Rod is and why it's so important to the Queen? You can find out in just a moment. Don't miss The Royal Beat on True Royalty TV, the world's first and only on-demand TV channel devoted to the best documentaries and shows about royalty. New releases. Travel back in time when William and Harry were thick as thieves in Buckingham Palace walls, royal children. Discover the shocking story of the Nepalese prince who murdered his father, King Birendra, in Asia's monarchies, Nepal. Understand the complicated life of the man who led England's only ever republic in Great Lives, Oliver Cromwell. You can get this and so much more only on True Royalty, the home of Royal TV. Hello and welcome back to The Royal Beat. Now, while the Queen has conducted a number of official engagements virtually following the death and sad passing of her husband, Prince Philip, the 11th of May marked the first time that she left Windsor Castle to carry out a public duty, and a very significant one at that. It was historically an event that the Queen always attended in the company of the Duke of Edinburgh, the annual state opening of Parliament. And here she is. All eyes were on her. Now, typically, every year, 600 people would be in attendance for this. This year, it was just 108. And the Queen didn't wear the crown, the 3,000 gemstones and that she would normally wear. In fact, she hasn't worn that since 2016, I believe. But here she is being walked in by Charles, flanked by Camilla. Talk me through, Robert, what is this? What is this event and why is it so important, especially for our viewers around the world?
Well, of course, the Queen is going to be reading her government's agenda for the next parliamentary term, and it basically goes back to the fact that, of course, they are the Parliament is sovereign, and that they are her government, and so she's addressing Parliament. And as before they go in, that's when you get the banging of the door by the Black Rod, who basically is seeking permission for the sovereign to enter the chamber, because it goes back to the days of when Charles the First, the Stuart Kings and the Divine Right Kings, when he got rid of Parliament, and so this is all ceremony. But actually, what is interesting, and when I started out doing this 30 years ago, of course, the ceremony was so much more lavish. It looked more lavish, and now it has actually been dressed down considerably. And of course, the other important point is that there's no Duke of Edinburgh, who hasn't been there for a couple of years anyway because of his retirement, and of course the Prince of Wales is the lead supporter.
I mean, in fact, there's only 2 occasions that the Queen has ever missed this occasion, and I think anybody would have forgiven her for wanting to see this one out. Previously, it was in 1959 when she was pregnant with Andrew, and in 1963 when she was due to give birth to Prince Edward. But there they are, mother and son.
I think this was her 67th opening, and in fact, Charles and Camilla have been supporting her and attending since 2013. There was something very poignant. Obviously, social distancing meant there were far fewer people. Again, a little bit like on this extraordinary nonagenarian monarch, and whatever you feel about the trappings and the soap opera that surrounds her, she seems to sort of, exemplify all that is dignified and impelled in these peculiar pandemic times. And I've got to say, in terms of style, she nails it in that lilac day dress.
Every time. OK, now on True Royalty, as well as some brilliant documentaries on our modern-day royals, we also have some fascinating shows on royal history, and not just from the UK, from around the world. And this week, to coincide with the anniversary of what would have been her marriage at just the age of 14, I mean, how was that allowed to happen? We've launched a new documentary on Marie Antoinette, the very last Queen of France.
Although known to the world as Marie Antoinette, her full name was actually Maria Antonia Josepha Johanna von Habsburg-Lothringen. And she was born at the Hofburg Imperial Palace in Vienna, Austria, on November the 2nd, 1755. Interestingly enough, the future Queen of France was born on the day that the French called Le Jour des Morts, the Day of the Dead.
To be born, the Day of the Dead. Thank you very much. That documentary can be seen in full here on True Royalty TV, which rather excitingly is now available in the US on Amazon Prime. Nice heart. So, Tessa, tell me a little bit more about she's considered to be quite an incredible queen. Married at 14, brutally executed. incredibly powerful in what was a male-dominated world at the time, and famed for being extravagant and careless. Has history recorded her fairly, do you think?
Well, the sort of extraordinary negative propaganda that was whipped up around her during the revolutionary period. She's a fascinating woman, the 15th of 16 children. What? I know, amazing, isn't it?
So how did she end up on the
Oh, a couple died of scarlet fever and so forth. Lots of hustle. Remember, sharp-elbowed mother marries her off. They were archduchesses, these girls. Marries her off to France. This is seen very importantly as a sort of operation of state. And there she goes to this young Dauphin, and they failed to consummate the marriage for about 7 years. I don't know how much is allowed on True Royalty TV, but he didn't work out that ejaculation was necessary for conception. That's what's believed. So anyway, there was no child for 7 years, and that causes problems because the marriage needed to be consummated in order for this sort of effectively royal alliance to be given legitimacy between what was France's old enemy, Austria, and the country itself. And there's another problem. Funnily enough, the Dauphin becomes, of course, Louis XVI. He doesn't take a mistress. What's wrong with him? You know, all French kings had mistresses. He didn't, and so there was no sort of object for the press to latch onto other than this foreign Austrian wife. So you can see already she becomes the sort of fiery period. She very much is sitting at the pinnacle of the opulence at a time which is disastrous for the French economy, and it's very easy to amplify all that is wrong with her. I mean, her two great skills are dancing and music, you know, and she wears a dress very well, and she's foreign, she's Austrian. They end up at war with Austria. So yeah, in the end, it's for the chop. And remember, in those days, the guillotine.
So who killed her? Who executed her?
The revolutionaries executed both of them. First, Louis XVI, and interestingly, I think they were quite fond of each other by the end. You know, obviously we know it was a state affair, their dynastic match, but they're fond of each other. She's devoted to her children, spends a lot of time and attention when they're effectively under house arrest, trying A, to secure their escape. She tries to escape to Austria, and B, with her children. And in the end, this horrible cart, she's in an open cart with her head going to her death, and we've industrialised death with the invention, I say we, the French, of industrialised death with the invention of the guillotine. Previously, you might take a couple of chops. With the guillotine, it is much more efficient, but it's a horrible period.
Grim death.
They kill the children as well.
Yes. I mean, her eldest son was apparently smuggled from prison.
She was accused of incest, of course. That was one of the horrible accusations, to which she responds. It's the only...
It's going to be all in here, I hope.
Yeah.
Yes, well, yes.
Gruesome watching.
I was going to say,
Makes the current royal family seem positively tame, doesn't it?
Exactly. And what are we getting all riled up about our modern-day royals for?
That was a real case for uproar.
Off with her head.
And the kind of, you know, oh, yeah, 14, it's time to get married.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it was just a deal, wasn't it, between the two countries?
Yeah. Wow. OK, well, we're going to stick with the past now, because this week is the anniversary of Queen Victoria's birthday. She ascended the throne at the age of 18. Literally just having turned 18 on June the 20th in 1837, and reigned supreme until her death at the age of 81 in 1901. Let's take a look at why she still looms so large in royal history.
1861 was Queen Victoria's annus horribilis. The deaths of her mother and her husband left her distraught. She fled London. It was presumed that her absence from the capital meant she was doing nothing, left inept by grief. In her journal, she bewailed the loss of her lover, her friend, her crutch.
He did everything, everywhere. Nothing did I do without him, from the greatest to the smallest. My first word was, I must ask Albert.
In her delirium, she turned the man she'd often resented and fought with into a demigod.
Those journals. I mean, Queen Elizabeth presented an online collection of the Queen Victoria's journals from the Royal Archives, and all of that is contained in that documentary, which of course you can watch here on True Royalty. But what did we learn about Victoria from her journals?
She's careful, she's considered, but she's also sensual. Her and Albert, I mean, she's deeply in love. That's what's so interesting. Remember, it's very narrow, the pool from which the Queen could shop, you know, for a husband. Had to be Protestant, had to be of equal royal standing. Effectively, you could go to Denmark or Germany, one of the sort of German princes, and that's what she got, her first cousin. she's absolutely enraptured with him, and you get that sense from her journal. You know, they spend the night in each other's arms, and they're so in love, and they're kissing. I mean, it's, you know, it's very sweet. It's not the best writing. It's not even Mills and Boon standard, but there is something that she has a sort of delicate touch, doesn't she?
Well,
she's also very, very sharp when it comes to the political situation of the day. I mean, obviously, when she started 18, it was a completely different thing. But if you read through her journals later on, she's very, very astute. She's multilingual. She's a very intelligent monarch. She knows how to play her prime ministers and the various cabinet at the time. And I think you also see very much up until his rather early death that Albert, although as Prince Consort, he was effectively a joint monarch with her.
More than. I think by the end he's psychologically dominated.
Which is really why a lot of the politicians were very wary